Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 8th edition of the Comic Art Collector Conversations. I hope you're ready. I hope you're excited. We've got quite the diverse panel of men to talk to you this evening. So let me bring them into the studio without any further ado, and we're going to be hopefully talking about a range of interesting discussion topics that will keep you stimulated and scintillated.
Hey, everyone.
All right, so good evening, everyone. Joining me today, Rob Rush.
Howdy.
Our first-time guest, Derek, very
Hey, how's it going?
professionally set up. In the bottom left, we've got Jeff D. Welcome, Jeff.
Hello, hello.
And joining us again, Iranga. Welcome.
Hey, guys. Thanks for coming.
No problem. So, unlike Dino, no fancy graphics, no fancy props, just straight talk. And, we will take a moment to remember our mentor, our friend, Bill Cox. He's on the sunny shores somewhere, working on that tan, sipping that drink. Bill, this one's for you. Thank you for trusting us with the keys to the ship. And I promise we will definitely run onto rocks this evening.
You
All right, let's just go around. Guys, say a quick hello. What's on your minds? Tell us, starting with Rob, just give us a minute on what this past week has been like for you.
Sure. Past week's been good. I'm excited to be here again to talk about art. I guess for me, I've been doing a lot with closing on a new condo, so not a lot of art purchases, but always good to talk about art regardless. So.
Very cool. Derek?
Excellent.
Yeah, this week's been great. It's been a really nice weekend. I'm kind of sitting by my computer checking for new commissions to be mailed in and seeing that things got out of customs and stuff like that. So, it's been a fun week.
So before we move on, give us a little bit of background on that. Why are you looking at emails, and what are you responsible for exactly?
Oh, I was just, I'm on one of the, I guess, maybe pre-spoilers, but one of the pieces that I brought tonight is a Grummet piece, and I was also on one of those lists as well. So, yeah, of course, it ships out of Canada. So, I was just kind of checking the tracking and all that kind of stuff. I got noticed that it shipped, a while back, but of course, once it basically, Canada's awesome, and then once it hits the U.S., like everything kind of slows to a halt. So I'm just kind of sitting there going, "Oh, it's
so this is stuff that you have coming in."
Yeah. So I was kind of excited about it.
Well, I hope it's also the packages include another awesome Transformers T-shirt, because that thing is truly incredible.
I have a rep to maintain, so I have to come with some kind of Transformers paraphernalia.
All right, let's move on to Jeff D.
Hey, that's been a pretty good week for me. I'm just happy to be here. I've been prepping. It's nice to be a part of one of these conversations. And so I've got some art coming. I got some art going. It's always moving and stuff around. And this is the start of my weekend. I love this. This is my night I've been waiting for. So I can't wait to.
And by Jeff's own admission, long-time lurker, first-time commenter.
Yes. Pretty much. I tell everybody I've had a CAF account since 2015, but I just started posting stuff. So I figured it was my time. I've been looking at everybody else's stuff for years. It's my time to start putting stuff out there. So.
Well, thank you for sharing. I personally always like to get a different perspective, and people who interact with the hobby in different ways always have their reasons for it. And it really does make sense when you hear about different ways to handle deals or different ways to approach getting the art you want. So we look forward to hearing from you.
Oh, yeah,
and finally, the baldest for last?
Absolutely. It's been a chill week, man. It's been a stress-free week, low-key weekend. Not really a whole lot to say other than that. Looking forward to this one, though.
Absolutely. I know I was jonesing for my comic art fix. So let's get right into it. As you guys watching may or may not know, and try to keep it abreast of the comments and the conversation as well. We have 4 panelists here with us this evening. They've all researched a topic that they have a great interest in to share with you. And we're going to look at some art as well, so you get all the good stuff. And we're going to start today with Rob. So Rob, why don't you tell us about your topic?
Sure. So the topic I want to talk about today, I think maybe there's probably a couple different dimensions of this, and I apologize in advance if this is going to end up sounding like a plug for modern art, but wanted to talk about kind of the difference in valuation of panels versus splashes versus covers, and then also how that relates to different eras of art as well. And kind of the reason I wanted to, I think there's like some general conventions out there. They're really hard to follow. I think they've gotten harder to follow as the market's gone up and prices have really focused on specific pieces rather than the types of pieces. But I mean, you could sometimes it's like 2x for a splash versus a panel, and then 5x for a cover versus a panel or something like that. All kind of depends on different series, different artists, etc. But the reason I brought this topic up is I know when I first got into collecting, I talked about this a little last week, but I found it really difficult to go back and buy older art because it already appreciated so much. And so when I was looking at art, it was like, okay, I could buy a modern cover that's really, really good for $1,500, or a similar cover from 10, 20 years ago would be like 10,000, 20,000, all depended on the series it was from. It's interesting that it feels like there's sort of this exponential gain the farther you, or exponential price the farther you go back, specifically with Big Two. I think it's a little different for more independent stuff or less popular stuff, but Big Two stuff, it tends to feel like the older the work is, just the more valuable it is. And it really struck me too when I was looking at I think I mentioned last time that 90s Kevin Hopgood was a particular nostalgia point for me, but not something I've really collected. I was keeping an eye on, didn't think I was going to bid on a cover that was in Heritage from that run. I think it was 287, and ended up going for $6,600. It's a cool cover, but there's a lot of modern covers you could get that are arguably substantially better for much, much less. So I just was curious to kind of hear other people's thoughts on the panel in terms of how do they approach? I'm sure the answer to everything ends up being nostalgia largely, but just curious how others approached kind of when you get into the hobby, looking at like the variance in prices when it's a panel versus splash versus a cover, and then also the age of those pages as well. For me, that was one of the big reasons I focused on modern art, was I felt the opportunity cost was too high, and for the older art, and I could get much better work for the modern art. But curious to hear others' thoughts as well.
Well, I think Dan raises a good point in the comments, particularly for me as a modern buyer. What we've seen is modern prices for modern covers are just going ballistic. And that gives context to the older covers. When you look at a modern cover that the price is for 5, 10, 15K, and you think about what that can buy in terms of older art, it becomes, I think, a very interesting question. And I often find myself diverting my funds to something older because I just don't feel like a modern cover sometimes can be worth so much.
Yeah, I think it's very specific modern art that's done that, though, not all of it.
Not all of it, for sure. But the artists who believe in themselves and who have a powerful sales force behind them, they're asking for really high prices, I find.
That's true. I guess like somebody like a Sean Gordon Murphy, or I mean, Alex Ross probably isn't part of that conversation.
Or the McNiven covers, the modern McNiven covers are expensive.
Right. True. Or Andy Kubert.
Sometimes some of the advantage in what Rob is suggesting in buying modern art is, sometimes you're buying directly from the artists themselves. So you have that maybe feeling, the good feeling in your heart that you're contributing directly to, the artist that you love or the artist that you want to support. And in that sense, like I don't have too much experience buying, I'd say, original art from elsewhere, but when I do buy it from elsewhere, usually it's going to be some kind of character focus, some kind of nostalgia, something that for me, I think the limits I place on myself become what is it that means a lot to me, and then that way I can sort of judge, whether or not it's something I want to pursue. Because just because something is affordable, it might not, maybe you might not have that same connection with it, whether it's modern or whether it's, I guess vintage, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's the thing with me, is because all of my nostalgia goes back to the 90s and the late 80s when I was collecting, because I was I started collecting when I was 15 back in 1989, and that was like when I got my first sketch. And it's one of those things where that's the stuff that means something to me. So I got out of comic art for a number of years, and then back in 2011 I got back into it. So it was like most of the stuff that I want, and I talk about this all the time, is my grails are pieces that I have no chance of ever obtaining, because I'm not a multi-millionaire and don't have disposable income like that. So I find that panel pages and semi splashes are definitely a better way for me to get the stuff that I want, because covers of the in that time period are very far out of my reach, especially the stuff that hits with me. You see pieces by an artist like Dave Hoover, nothing against Dave Hoover, he was a study artist for Marvel for years and years. He just had a Captain America cover go for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars. And I remember when you could get Dave Hoover art for like $20 for a splash page, or you could even get a cover for a couple $100. So the modern art, I think that what makes it great is the fact that there's so much of it, and there's so much good art. And it's definitely way more affordable than those pieces. And now that we've got, sort of younger people that are collecting, people who are now not like me in their late 40s, but people who are in their 30s and their late 20s or right or almost 40, they're hitting that great sweet spot where they have they've got a good income, they make good money, and they're feeling that nostalgia for those pieces. And some of the newer stuff is the stuff that really speaks to them. So I think that it's definitely, a way for them to get the stuff that, that they want. And it's definitely a lot cheaper to buy the newer it is than to go back to the stuff that was, that's a lot older.
I'm a little bit kind of outside this realm, because when I started collecting a couple of years ago, walked in just kind of kicking the door down saying, all right, what can I find? And then learned really quickly that the stuff that really appealed to me in terms of published art, regardless of whether it was a panel page or a splash or a cover, I'd missed the boat on that stuff, right? So I had to make a decision fairly early. Like, if I had an artist that I had an emotional connection to or a nostalgic connection to, the only way I was going to do it was by trying to get a commission. So I had to kind of draw that line in the sand for myself and say, I only have X amount of bandwidth, and I'm going to focus it on, getting commissions and building up my collection from these artists that I grew up loving, on that end of things. And in terms of, and of course, there's obviously exceptions to that, to people who are no longer around that you can't get that stuff from. But interior art, because of that, has been something I've kind of shied away from. I'll look at like covers and stuff for modern books, but not so much for the older stuff.
I was just going to follow up on something. Maybe as a counterpoint to the suggestion that it's really easy to get into modern art. It's accessible in terms of pricing. I think one thing that I've noticed is sometimes the modern art is for sale before the comic even comes out. So sometimes, like, I've seen things where I've been tempted or interested in either acquiring the art or even just reading the new comic book, and I go, hey, that looks really cool, and then I see like the entire issue goes up for sale, and I'm kind of like looking at this and going, I'm like, maybe I should read this first, and by the time you do that, of course, it's all gone, right? So there's that kind of give and take where if you don't have some connection to it somehow, I mean, sometimes it can be something simple, like you follow a character, right? And in that case, maybe that's all you care about, right? Like, as long as you get a cover from the character that you love, that's what means the most to you. But sometimes I think I've been hesitant to go down the modern art rabbit hole, just because sometimes, like, you've all said this, lovely in all of these conversations, but you really have to network. You really have to be on the pulse of things and know what the cool new book is going to be to sort of slide into that type of art purchase. And sometimes with me, I'm like, okay, well, I like to take my time and read different comics and figure out what I like and stuff. And if I come across something like that tickles my nostalgia bone or even tickles my modern bone, and I go, man, that's a great panel or a great moment or something that I think is ideal, then maybe I'll try to, make a run for it. But sometimes there's that buyer remorse sense where it's like sight unseen. You can't just go all in on something that you feel like you've never really legitimately read or had a connection to.
No, I think that's an interesting point. Sometimes even if the art isn't up before the comic's out, it's up like the day after the comic's out. So you have to even if it's after the comic's out, you still have to read it like immediately. I know one of the most anxiety inducing purchases I probably made was I bought a cover set, 5 modern covers, after only the first cover was revealed. And so I basically just waited on pins and needles to see what the remaining 4 covers looked like. Fortunately, they all ended up good, and I was excited and really thrilled with the purchase, but you never know with that. And I think one question that's come up a few times in the comments, which I think is interesting, is what is modern art? Like, what time period is that? And I think that's kind of interesting because I think we all probably have slightly different answers to that question. I saw somebody in the comments say it's 1980s forward. If you asked me, I'd probably say it's like 2002 forward or like 2000 forward, like after kind of the Onslaught, Heroes Reborn, Heroes Return arc. After that is kind of struck me as the end of the 90s and the beginning of modern art. But I think it's an interesting question because I think it's different for everybody.
Yeah, I think it sort of sets up like generations do for age groups. Like, you have your generation Y and Z, and it's the same thing. Like for me, the stuff that came out from the late 80s through, I want to say like 93, right into 94 is like, that's one category right there. And then from 94, you can just see the color difference in the comics. You can see the 90s sort of aspect of it go for almost, the rest of the 90s. And then the 2000s on, I think, is sort of, has its own feel. And like I said, I got back into books in 2011. So for me, when I'm thinking about modern stuff, I'm thinking about like 2010 to the present. It's almost that if you're a DC fan, it's almost that like New 52, on to Rebirth, on to other stuff, like that's what I think of, from that. And then in Marvel, obviously there's an equivalent. You have like your Civil War and those sort of storylines that came on.
I agree with you, Jeff. I think the modern era is a little harder to define. For me, it's kind of just split up into several eras within, the modern era. The post-Image exodus at Marvel, I mean, that's a line, that's a flag there for me. They had Marvel had an era where, they were just trying to figure out what they could do when that happened, and then they started having a really solid lineup again with like Matter Era and those guys on the X books, and at the same time they started shifting away from newsprint to glossy and stuff like that and digital coloring, and that was a whole other era. And then you got the era today where you're kind of competing and hoping that an artist is still doing work traditionally and not just digitally. So there's that balance of it, and I think to me, that's like the latest era that we're in, is this slow transition from people moving from traditional to all the way digital, or at least partially digital. It's a really hard era for me to kind of pin down like that.
I think the way the pages are created is really interesting too, because I think you see a lot of collectors who, it's like they only, if they're buying a panel page, it has to have like the word bubbles on it. But then like for somebody like me, who just came into collecting the last 2 years, it's like nothing has word bubbles on it. So like when I'm collecting pages, like I think that's partly why like I gravitate. Part of it's obviously there's financial barriers to like splashes versus panels, etc. But I tend to gravitate towards modern splashes and covers because that I want an image I can put on my wall is sort of what is one of the priorities for when I collect. But I know a lot of collectors, it's that sequential storytelling that's really important, because that's one of the really unique and really fascinating aspects of the hobby. and the word bubbles on the older comics really highlight that. Then you get things too where like you have like a blue line piece, for example, a blue line with inks. Like I don't really care if, as long as the piece of art I am buying is the single copy of that art out there, it doesn't really bother me if the pencils are digital, for example. If it's a Bristol board with digital pencils printed onto the page, then traditionally inked on top of that, that's not really a worry for me. But I know for others, it's like they really want to see those pencil artifacts on the page so they can really see that kind of development process. So I think it's really interesting because there's a lot of different ways, I think, to appreciate the art from different generations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that blue line conversation, that could be a whole 2-hour show.
I know.
Itself.
It's like you have no control over that. I mean, it might be nice to think like, oh yeah, it'd be great as long as this is the only one. But sometimes you see stuff where you go, hey, that's the same exact thing, but now it's inked. And you kind of wonder how does the person feel about that? Yeah, I mean that must feel horrible,
happened to me,
right?
where I bought a triptych of the original pencils, and I saw on CAF that the ink version was being offered, and I was just a little bit surprised that the person who sold me the pencils didn't tell me that, oh, there's also the inks are out there as well. And we've started to see it now with Ryan Stegman and JP Mayer are a very prominent example of someone who I thought Felix did a great job of immediately making the decision that I'm going to sell the pencils and inks together. But I'm seeing them broken up more and more on a daily basis now. Listings on CAF that these are the inks, does not include the pencils, et cetera, et cetera. And just as a somewhat of a person who buys a lot of modern art, it is an extremely odd market to wrap your head around. The prices are high, and I saw a comment about someone buying pieces on sight unseen, and I really don't do that. But sometimes you're put in a position where you kind of have to. But the way you make that palatable and reasonable is that you've done your research and you are committed to your choice. That, hey, this is a writer-artist team that I enjoy, and that they're going to put out good work, so I kind of take that chance. I buy a lot of complete issues. The only one I bought sight unseen was Silver Surfer Black #3. And that's the way those sales were going down.
That was a terrible mistake, wasn't it, Mikhail?
Awful.
I just, but
turn in your card.
What helps turn around that bad decision is the fact that, hey, there's always modern art. There's great art being created every single day, and by artists who are, coming up, who are looking to prove themselves. And that's not an excuse to take advantage of them, but certainly it's an area where you can get a better price for a piece of art, whether you're just starting out or whether you're a seasoned collector. I think there's so many options in many price ranges. And that's my main regret when I'm walking a con, is that there's so many artists that I would love to commission everyone with a piece at their table that looks appealing and that catches my eye, but there's a finite resource. But if you forego $1,000 piece, you can commission, 4 $250 pieces, and the artist is happy with that. And, you're going to, if you've made your choice well, you're going to get a good piece as well. So there's still choices outside of price. But modern, I think, is offering in all at once, all the options. You can buy a $20,000 modern cover, or you can buy a $250, commission, or a published page for that matter. And from a good artist, from an established artist, go to Cadence's site. Deadly Class pages are still available. Very reasonable, great pages, good characters. So, well, I think that was a great discussion topic, Rob. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we can continue. We will continue to refine what is modern art. I think, as we saw in the comments, there are lots of different options about thoughts about that. But I think we all feel that going forward, it's what's being produced now, and that needs to be actioned quite quickly if it's popular. Daniel Warren Johnson, all these artists who are just so hot, where whatever they're doing is saleable.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's look at some art to take our minds off this horrible money problem. And we're going to start with Jeff's picks.
Sure. Well, before you throw it up, I was going to say, back when I first started collecting, you would, if you wanted to get art, you pretty much would, you get a lot of it just straight from the artists. I would go to a lot of conventions when I was younger. They had local conventions around where I live. I live near DC, so they had, like, Jubilee was a company that would have conventions around here about every 3 months, and you'd go, and there'd usually be like one artist, and the rest of the room was full of comic books and other memorabilia. And I would just get there, an hour before the show, go straight to the artist. And I started off just getting sketches. That's how I started at 15. I didn't start, at 15 and go, I'm going to buy some pages, that are from books. That I just wanted to get something personal from the artist. Like this, I still have the first piece of art that I ever got from Sal Buscema. This is the one that got me started. Was a free sketch that I got. And that's the kind of, that's the time period that I love, that late 80s, when you could go up to artists, you could talk to them, and you could get, you could actually get pieces straight from them. And there's still artists that do that from today. Like we were talking about the two different ones. And that's another thing with the Blue Line inks. Like I've gotten pencil pieces for published pages, and then I've seen the inks, which is, the finished published piece, go for 4 or 5 times what I paid for the pencils, because I got them straight from the artist. And I often wonder when I'm looking through people's calves and they have older pieces, like, how long have they had this? Where did they get it from? What kind of journey did it go on? And when I picked pieces, I picked 2 different pieces tonight, both from the year 1989. And if you want to show the first one, I can.
Oh yeah, get right into that.
Sure. So I picked one from a comic book legend. He's one of my favorite artists of all time, and I wanted to pick something a little different. He didn't do a lot of work for Marvel, but when he did work, it was spectacular. It just his lines and the way that he does everything is just incredible. And I'm sort of trying to buy time right now while we're finding the piece of artwork to put up.
It should be up.
It's, yeah.
Let me describe it to you.
Start from the top left corner, Jeff.
Yeah, exactly. Let me see if I can, print it out in my head. But for technical difficulty, I'll just, keep talking about it then, or the artist. So he's basically known for his long work for DC. He was part of the British invasion, and he only did a very few books for Marvel where he did covers. He's basically a cover artist. So a lot of you might be able to figure this out. Some of you may not. But the artist is Brian Bolland, and he did a couple of covers of note. Most of them were with Howard the Duck in them. So I picked the cover for She-Hulk that he did with Howard the Duck on it, and it's a very interesting story unto itself about this piece of art. And I can talk about the story while we're waiting for that too, because there was some sort of a snafu, and it's sort of kind of an urban legend as to chicken or the egg, which came, but. Whether Marvel misplaced his art or whether he was late delivering it. At any rate, they used basically a fax that he had sent them of the prelim, and they had Mark Texiera redo it, and so they could get it out to print. And then they eventually got the other cover, and they printed an overlay of the other cover. So when it went to comic book stores, they got the book, and then they got the overlay, which they were supposed to slip over the book, and there was a big whole oops thing that was filled out in it, and it's not easy to do.
Page,
I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what I did, but I think we finally got it.
And Chris, it's not Mio tonight. Just for you, buddy. We got a little Basil Hayden in the house, so I wasn't getting caught with my pants down again with the Mio stuff.
But the piece is it's one of my favorite characters from the 90s. You get the She-Hulk, and if anybody can see behind me, I have my pride and joy of my collection is this Byrne She-Hulk sketch. And that one right there was about 30 years in the making as well. And that's a whole other story for another time. But so when I saw this cover in a calf gallery, I just knew that I wanted to show it off for the uniqueness of the piece, for the background, for just, anybody who's ever seen Brian Bolland, you're probably most familiar with him with his work for The Killing Joke is probably the most famous thing he's ever done, along with Animal Man covers and Wonder Woman covers and Judge Dredd. but I actually have had a chance to talk with him, and he's a really interesting guy. And but the stuff that he brings, it's otherworldly. And he's one of these guys who is also on the forefront of digital art. He has been doing digital since 1997, which, a lot of people wouldn't, you wouldn't know, but he was there in the beginning of it. And he doesn't do it, he's very adamant about saying, people who, do art digitally, it's, they don't do it because it's simpler or because it's easier. It's because it allows them more freedom to, they're not stuck working within what they've done. They can, if there's something that they want to change, they can alter it, and it's still them drawing. It's not the computer drawing for them.
And I think he in his own words, he said, there's not an effing draw Batman button. Right?
That's right. He did say that. Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry to do this. This is fucking horrible. Fuck StreamYard.
I think
it's sharing my screen. So fuck all of
That's
this
all right, buddy.
nonsense.
Listen, we have it up here. It's great. It's there. I don't have to talk about it anymore. You guys can see it. So you can just see how incredible this piece is. She-Hulk in space. She's on like half of a pill. It's just all the shapes, all the background, everything he did. You don't even want to look at the Texeira version of this cover because it loses so much in just him doing it. It's nothing against Texeira. It's just that he was given a hard job to do. Marvel just wanted him to do something. But if you own this book, I hope that you got the slip sleeve to go over it, because it's just like I said, the line detail, his expressions, just everything that Balin does to it, just the weirdness of it. And that's one of the things I love about his stuff. That's why I loved his Animal Man stuff. But he's only done about 3 covers for Marvel, and this is one of them. And it's my personal one of my personal favorites of the Balin stuff. But I'd love to hear what you guys think.
I gotta be honest, like the She-Hulk run for this, I knew I read all the Byrne issues, and then the minute Byrne left, I stopped reading the book. And then when Byrne came back around the 40s, then I started reading it again. So like this is kind of a blind spot for me. So I'm kind of curious, like, was this free? Like when they because I know Texeira did the cover and you had to pay for She-Hulk 14, but then didn't they issue like some kind of, I don't know, apology thing so Bolin wasn't mad, like where they just released something with like a preview of like the next couple issues for the arc or something?
It was literally sent to comic book stores where they got, imagine a cover that's not attached to anything. And what they told the comic book stores to do was to slip it over top of every single copy of the comic.
Oh, okay.
And
okay.
but because some of them just threw it in the garbage, they were just like, we're not going to do that. We're just going to throw them away. So, but that's what they were going to do. Newsstands obviously didn't do that. But so there ended up being 2 original covers for this, and you can, if anybody can Google this at any point in time and find it. And like I said, it's sort of like one of those urban legends. I don't think I'm sure Balin knows the true story about it, but and I'm sure somebody else does too. But from what I hear, it's okay. It's one of those things where either somehow it got misplaced, didn't show up on time, or Marvel was worried it wasn't going to, and they just jumped the gun, because obviously they could do it, because it came to the comic book stores the same day. But like I said, it's just the art itself, and the artist just that he's always spoken to me. I'm very lucky to have met him and gotten a couple of Joker sketches from him over the years. So But
Jeff, what's the story with the cover where like there's a lot of like household kitchen instruments back there? There's like a sunny side egg, a blender, a toaster, an egg beater.
I wish I could remember the storyline of why he did that and how it was so crazy.
It's a boss cover, man. Balin's just awesome.
Absolutely.
And I was just coincidentally commenting on one of Marcus Wise pieces today, which is a Balin Wonder Woman cover. And it's got a bunch of cherries on it that he's hand drawn, and then along with her hair, which is just like line by line perfection. It's really incredible.
No. But since I had to take up way too much time with that one, so I'll
sorry guys, again, apologize for the difficulties and the horrible presentation of the art. You're going to see more of that later this evening. In the meantime, let's move on to Derek's topic.
So I think it segues pretty nicely, just to spit it right out. What I kind of wanted to talk about was collecting comic book covers, and I guess talking about like the different types you can collect. And this kind of segues into some of the questions that Rob had as well. But I guess for me, this year, one of my focuses or one of my collecting goals was to pick up a comic book cover. And the main inspiration for this is one of my good buddies is on a Firestorm fan appreciation site, and I sent Mikhail some images of this. So if he could put up slide 1, and I could talk about it. But there was a cover to the Fury of Firestorm issue number 33, and when he posted how he displayed that, I just looked at it and thought, like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, you know. And it wasn't necessarily so much, I mean, I love Firestorm as a character, but it wasn't so much that particular issue or any, you know, nostalgic sense of appreciation in that sense, but just I just love the way he, like, look at that, like, that's so cool. And so basically I was just kind of like, I want to do something like that. Like, this is me, like, keeping up with the Joneses or something. I was like, this is so cool. So basically, I guess Mikhail could put up the second slide. I did achieve my goal, and I was able to, you know, thanks to Super Pal's art, thanks to Fred Chamberlain, I was able to get an Andrea DeVito cover of an issue that really means a lot to me. I basically put it, I was, you know, having some kind of midlife crisis or whatever, and I did this thing where basically, instead of I think people had this meme that was going around where it's like, you know, list your favorite movie for each of the years you've been alive, basically. Like, so basically at the time I listed like 40 comic books instead of films, because that's what I'm apt to do. I reject the film memes, but I apply them to I apply the film memes to comic books and everything. And when I went over all the comics that came out this year, this issue was one of my favorites. Like, I love Franklin Richards. Like, he's one of my favorite characters, and I just really appreciate the issue in general. And when I saw that came out, you know, I emailed Fred, and there's kind of a funny story about that, because I had met him at Heroes Con, and I didn't realize that I had met him at Heroes Con, and we were talking and stuff, and I said, hey, I got really lucky at Heroes Con, and I you know, got I won a sketch from Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, praise be his name, and it was super awesome. And he emails me back and says, I was there. Like, I, you know, basically, and now I kind of put two and two together, and I kind of know the whole story. But at the time, I was like, my bad. I didn't, you know, I didn't make all these connections and everything. But basically, that was my goal, and I achieved the goal. But I guess what I'd like to talk about with everybody else, because I'm kind of a noob to this, and in this particular example, you know, it's a penciled cover, and that was done in that era. I mean, I don't know if that's just generally atypical of you know, certain artists. I don't know if it's atypical of certain eras, because I'm thinking of, like, I think, what was it, like Salvador LaRocca was similar, right? He just did pencils, and they colored the whole Extreme X-Men. So, you know, in this case, this seems to be very similar to me. It's like, it's the pure pencils, and, you know, what basically do people like getting other types? You know, like, they talked about the type of people that, you know, they want the word balloons, they want the stats and the overlays and all that kind of stuff. And who knows, that might be my next goal. I want something with a stat or something with an overlay. Or can can somebody, you know, commission someone to create an overlay for me, you know, and I could just put a transparency over it, you know, like, that's basically the kind of stuff that I was interested in discussing with the crew and the chat, and, you know, what people thought about that. Like, in the case of, like, Jeff's cover, I mean, it's a published cover, but it wasn't the original published cover, but it technically was the published cover. And there are stats you can see the glue marks where things were taken apart and everything. And it's like, is that complete? Is that incomplete? Like, sometimes I see, I guess, Mikhail, if you post some of these other examples, like, this is just for me, like, to illustrate what I'm talking about. But, like, one of the issues that means a lot to me, just because it was, you know, a spinner rack issue as a kid, and I remember seeing this come up on Heritage, and I was like, oh man, superpowers, like, I love this stuff. Like, the Kenner Superpowers line is what got me into comics, and I was just thinking, wow, they've got the original cover up. But then the more I looked at it, you know, not that, you know, who knows, maybe I was in no position to bid on this, or maybe I was, but the more I looked at it, I kind of thought, well, where's the Stargate? You know, where's the overlay? Where's the stat of superpowers? You know, where's the a 4-part miniseries? Like, and the more I looked at it, I'm like, is that incomplete? Is there a transparency out there somewhere that somebody scrunched up and threw in a trash can? Like, what, you know, what does that mean? Like, and would you be hesitant to buy this? Would you want to buy this? And I guess the last example I have is an issue from the Marvel limited series Magic, which again, I guess I'm giving away all my likes here, but these are all issues that I looked at or saw for sale and things like that and went, wow, like I love this comic. And looking at this is even more interesting to me because I can see there's stats, but then there's a stat with kind of the, you know, the impact lines and the battle, but then there's a stat without the impact lines. I'm kind of like, stuff like that. Like, this is why I say I'm a noob and I'm opening it up to everyone else, you know, in the chat and in the group. Like, that I don't get. So that's kind of what my topic is. It's like collecting covers. Like, what does those variances mean to people, and what are you more enticed by, the original kind of without the stats, or would you like it to be, you know, I guess quote unquote complete, you know, with all that paraphernalia that comes with it?
In general, I like it to just be the pure art, right? But you did provide like 2 really good examples of of covers where I'm starting to rethink that. But the first cover more than the Magic cover, because there seemed to be they filled in the star with just, I mean, there was just negative space in there. It just looked out of whack, right? So I also don't get why they did that, but, you know, I'm sure there's a reason for that. That one for sure, I would have an issue with that. The second one, the Magic cover, is not so much. I actually prefer, like, if it was a cover, for it to be unfettered by, you know, the cover treatments or any of that stuff. I don't really have I mean, if I had a preference, it'd be the naked art, if you will. But those are a couple of great examples of cases where, or I would say another example is if it was a cover where the character was interacting with the logo, right? I would definitely want that in there, because that's the essence of the cover.
You can't have the Beta Ray Bill issue without him smashing through the Thor logo, right?
Right. Sure. Or the Hulk issue, the Steranko cover, or Extinction Agenda.
I know a lot of those older covers. If they were printing 2 things in different colors, like if something was supposed to be lighter than the other, they would do them. Yeah,
that Stargate was blue. It was like a blue highlight, so that's
right, exactly. And I used to own a Cochrane X-Men page where it was actually 2 separate pieces of art, and they also gave me an overlay with it. So it was, you had there was 2 boxes that were done on the comic, and they were done in like really light blue. I guess they were supposed to be some sort of light, or it was something, but they were done separately. So I had the actual page that had everything except for these 2 blocks, and then I had a page that just had the 2 blocks. And then they made a translucent overlay that you could put over the art so you could see what the finished and done piece looked like. So, I mean, I guess it would matter. I mean, obviously, I think, you know, if it came like that, you would definitely want both pieces of art. I would want both pieces of art. But if for instance, you know, the only one of them was available, I guess it would just depend, you know, on whether you would be, you know, at peace with only owning a part of the finished cover instead of the entire thing.
Right. Now, I think this question is really fascinating. I've actually given it a decent amount of thought, because looking at like the modern stuff that I mostly have, and then the older stuff, I feel like a lot of those older covers were like made to have stats, whereas like a lot of modern covers, they kind of draw the picture and then they like digitally put the stats on top. And I think it really is partly due to the fact that you can really digitally modify a piece now versus having to do the physical modifications to it before. I think one thing that's fascinating too, and really frustrating, is kind of like you're talking about, like there's multiple pieces to some of these covers. So like sometimes a cover feels incomplete. Like, I mean, and then like even with some modern stuff, like I've got a cover, a Cosmic Ghost Rider cover, where Kamala Khan as Captain Marvel's up at the top, and the published cover, the image of her is completely different from the original cover. And it's like, I don't know if that was a patch. I don't know if that was digital. It's like, should I like go ask Felix, hey, is there a patch out there I can get? Did I get thrown away? Like, it doesn't bother me too much, because one fairly minor part of that cover versus
the whole thing. But then I've got another piece that's not on my calf yet, but I have like a panel from Thor God of Thunder by Asad Rabik, where he blew up the panel and drew it on like half a Bristol board, and then shrunk that panel digitally and inserted that panel onto the page. It's like, so if you bought, and then also on that Bristol board, he has a background element from another page from the same series, from that same issue. And so you can never own that page that has that image on it without owning that other Bristol board, that other page essentially that has the panel on it, or that background element. It's just, there's a lot of, this kind of stuff doesn't really go away with modern art, I guess, is kind of what I'm trying to get to as well. It kind of depends on artist to artist as well. It's fascinating. It can be a little frustrating to collect too, because I know I always want to try to have the complete page or the complete cover if I collect it.
But if the artist is selling it and the physical parts exist, I mean, you should only be able to sell that as a set, right?
That's not how, no. I mean, like if you look at like Anthony selling the Asad Rabik stuff, he's got like a patch out on there right now. That's like if you're familiar with the Thor God of Thunder line, it's like the Black Berserkers, which is like one of the enemies in it. And what Rabik will do is he'll draw something once and then reuse it on on different pages to save time. And so that patch is probably on several different pages. And so that was sold separately. It's a little different than like with pencils and inks, like that is a little bit easier of a conversation, I think, and is more common, where like Felix, obviously with JP Mayer and with Ryan Stegman, make sure they're together. But sometimes like if the inker and the penciler are repped by different people, they just automatically get split up. And then in the cases with these patches, I don't see that as frequently. And I feel like depending on how meaningful the patch is or how the patch was used, they often get broken up. I think sometimes the artists don't even like think of the patch as extra artwork, and will just toss it, or like it'll stay in their sketchbook and it'll never really see the light of day.
That's an interesting, that's kind of a unique case, right? But the way
it's pretty works. Yeah, with the patches. Assad's definitely a unique case. I don't think I've seen another artist do that before, but I have seen like with Jeff Shaw, like I have a lot of his art, and so pretty familiar with what he does. And he's definitely got some digital stuff. There's 2 covers I know of where the cover was changed, and I know for sure one has a patch, and I don't know if the other one has a patch or if it was done digitally.
Right. So with Assad's patch, that's fantastic, right? Like, because if you own one of the pages and the patch, you own that entire page as well as parts of multiple pages.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
so
interesting.
Does that increase the value of the patch? Is it like
I would
like
say
10
so.
pages? Does it like own 20?
I don't know. It's a really tough conversation. I mean, I think a lot of how they've been sold is just how good is the specific art on that one page.
Right.
I think the other thing that's interesting about this conversation is that when you look at a CAF gallery, and when you look at someone who's kind of, I'd say 1990 to 2000, before that era or after that era, and they arrange their 12 featured pieces, it's a very different effect. And we're specifically talking about comic art, so the words, the titles, the overlays, are kind of a part of the published piece. So when someone has a gallery of 12 pieces with the title and everything presented nicely, it looks very different from a gallery, which mine often ends up being like, which I'll put up 12 covers with no titles, nothing. And it presents very, very differently to me. And I noticed that, and as I've aged into collecting a little bit, I am now experimenting with overlays to kind of get that effect. And not to quibble with what Rob said, the modern artists are leaving space for the titles and the word balloons and the overlays, but they have more flexibility with how they can make changes at the final moment, etc. But it is still part of the published page that you see, and a cover is meant to have the title on it in some respect, right? I mean, that's the whole point of the cover. And we saw a great cover posted today by Bill J with an interaction with the title, which is always, again, special. We just mentioned Beta Ray Bill smashing through the Thor logo. I mean, that's it makes it special, it makes it different, and it immediately connects us to the nostalgia of the piece.
I did see a question. I just wanted to answer that Superpowers cover. I'm pretty sure it's Carmine Infantino. Like, don't hold me to it, but somebody asked who did the art on that. I'm pretty sure that's him.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Rob. Sorry. Thank you very much, Derek. And I do agree. I think that's why I placed the topic like that, because, you know, this conversation is ever evolving, you know, completely. The covers continue to command a premium as a showpiece of your collection, as something that's special and different. And I don't think we're going to see that change anytime soon.
Yep.
All right, let's look at some art. Iranga, I think you're up.
Okay, right on.
And it's going to be ghetto again, so apologies.
Put it over Rob's face this time.
No, actually, what's going to happen is it's going to go over my face. I think that's the fairest way to do it.
Okay.
Mikhail just wants to creep around the corner. That's what it is.
I need to refill my drink badly.
Is it? I'm not even
All right,
sure.
So, what's your first piece? Is it the grommet?
Oh, that's not mine.
No.
Oh, sorry.
You can pick one, man.
Which?
It's either Jose or James.
Flawless live television for you guys. I want you all to.
Hey, I'll tell you what. Like, this is still better than the last live one. Not this show, but I did a show where everything went wrong. This is Mikhail. You're doing fantastic, dude.
No,
Yeah,
I know I'm awesome. I know I'm pretty amazing.
Well,
And
I mean,
the fact that StreamYard is refusing to share my screen is really not on me. So you know, I'm just gonna let it go.
There you go. All right.
Beautiful.
So this is Cable and Nick Fury by Jose Ladron. It's in the gallery of RBH. I fanboy over Ladron like nobody's business, man. I love this dude. You look at this right here. He's got the earth tones down at the bottom, and then, you know, warms up as you go over to the middle center, and then he's got that wedge, the cool wedge of the city background back there. He started, at least he caught my eye on the early run on Cable, and he was, you know, an unkind description would be a Kirby clone when he first started on that book, but you know, his style caught my eye at a time when, you know, a lot of people were aping the image aesthetic, and this was just kind of different. He moved over onto the Inhumans miniseries, and around that time is when he started developing this style, which was he was mixing paints up with inks, and he was really like kind of coming into his own as an artist. And then really for me personally, when he took off was when he hooked up with Comicraft and started doing the covers and the interiors for Hip Flask and Elephant Man. I mean, he I think it was 2006. He actually won an Eisner for Best Painter for his cover work on Hip Flask. The guy's just amazing. And if you he's currently working on the next volume of Sons of El Topo. But in the meantime, he's done some cover work, or he is working on some covers for DC. I don't know if you guys have seen his cover for Future State Batman, but it's just incredible. It's a rear shot of Batman jumping off a building onto this futuristic cityscape. I don't have a whole lot to say about this guy. You know, I fanboy over him hard. I love his work. I've got a commission from him, and I've got another one kind of I'm working on right now. I mean, I could do 2 a year from this guy, but that's my first pick.
Yeah, no, it's really fantastic. I love the sort of muted colors, that it didn't have to be super bright, and then it's coming at you, but sort of going around you. It's just and the way that he uses the fire without having to put in too much detail, it still lets your imagination kind of fill it in. It's really great.
Yep, it's just like it's earth, warm comes up, and like the cool tones, he's used a wedge coming down on Nick Fury, and then Fury's got the cool tones of his costume, and then the contrast with the warm tones of Cable's. There was another piece on Cap that I really dug, and it was a Mr. Miracle piece, but Cable was my dude, and this one had fewer eyes on it, so I figured like more people needed to check this one out.
Oh yeah.
That's a great run that he did on Cable. I mean, and that piece definitely evokes that. I mean, I remember. Well, I don't know if this is damning praise or not, but if you were totally like not into X books and then you checked out that Cable run, I felt like I was blown away because I was like, oh, Cable gets to interact with like the whole Marvel universe, and this is so fun. And I wouldn't call him a Kirby clone. I'd just be nice and say, you know, a long line of people that have been inspired by Kirby. I mean, if you like I'm going to mess up the name here. If you like Tom Scioli, if you like Tom Scioli's work, you know, it's got a similar aesthetic. You know, it's got those Kirby vibes and that kind of energy and dynamism and everything. So I mean,
that early Cable one for sure. And Joe Casey was firing on all cylinders on that book.
Yeah,
too,
and that piece is pretty much it. I mean, especially Nick Fury. I mean, Nick Fury and Cable. I mean, it's great.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I'm jealous of RBH. You know, if you ever want to move it, RBH. Yeah.
All right, shall we move on to the next piece?
Yes, sir.
Oh, he gets to show two. I guess my riffing knocked my second piece out. I got you.
Oh, that's right, Jeff. I'm sorry. Newbies get one.
I know.
Yeah. So this is Cyclops by James Herron. It's in the gallery of Kent Mansley. I believe this was from the most recent round of Herron's commissions through Felix. I mean, you gotta love the use of color in this piece. I mean, you know, set aside how dynamic it is, but you know, he's essentially using like two colors and not a lot of variation in hue. As you work your way from the bottom to the top of the picture, he does kind of go, when you look at the outlines of building, he mixes the red and the blue for a little purple effect before like transitioning right into the blue. I've never seen his optic blast done this way, where everything from the blast downwards is just bathed in the red of the blast. I just think this is terrific. If you look at,
I believe the point of this list was for him to experiment with color play, correct?
So I think everyone who got on this list got a stellar break, because it was supposed to be, they were all supposed to be black and white, but everyone, did you get on that list too, if I'm not mistaken, in that round? Because everyone,
I believe my Rhino was from his latest round.
That's right. You got the Rhino just kind of like in that square, kind of just boxed in. But I think everyone just got this stellar upgrade to color because he wanted to kind of try it out, right? So I mean, I'm kicking myself for not having been on that round. But you know, the textures here, he's added the red spatter on the background to give it some texture, but he's used brush strokes to mimic speed lines from the ground up to evoke upward motion. You know, it's the thing with James is there is a tendency to consider him overhyped, but I think that's incorrect, because I mean, this dude lives up to the hype. His stuff is incredible, and he's on my list of like top like modern artists kind of doing work right now, along with like DWJ and those guys. So this piece is an absolute personal favorite of mine. Kent, same offer to you that I offered to RBH. I mean, you know, call me. Yep, that's it.
I believe I recall Felix saying that, you know, James is going to experiment with color on these pieces, and I think all the results have been pretty amazing. And I really like the gradient that he put in at the top. And like you're saying, bathing him in the color of the blast. And also what we see differently here is that the blast is not spreading. It's very tight.
Right. Straight beam going up, and then everything from the beam and the visor down is just bathed in red. Yeah, there is a tendency, again, like I said, once you get into artists who have, good reps doing the work that they were hired to do, people tend to have that fatigue of, hey, this guy's constantly being talked about as like an innovator and this and that. But I 100%, the hype is real with James, I think.
I have to thank you, Aranga, because I was not familiar with the work at all, and then today I read the 4 issues of Ultra Mega, and I was just like, wow, that was really cool. So
Right.
I appreciate it, and thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Jill seems to think she got a preview of my OnlyFans page. Incorrect. That's a lot scarier.
No, I think Aranga's just
Only
using this format
previewing what he'll take in payment.
Yeah. I wish I had thought of just like putting out 2 pieces from pieces that I want people to sell me. That's like the perfect thing to do. It's like, oh, I need these pieces out
Not
there.
just a hat rack, my friend. Not just a hat rack.
Exactly. Bravo.
Fantastic piece. James really produces some great pieces that get you to come back and look at them again and try and figure out like what did he do here and why is it flowing like this. So I do always appreciate that.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Aranga, thank you very much. And I think we're moving on to Jeff's topic.
Well, I hope people haven't gotten sick of me talking tonight. I've had to do a lot of it. But so my focus was, I think that, a lot of us, I think, and who've been in this business, even for just a few years, what I like to call this is I call it diminishing return. And it's when you sell a piece of art for less than you bought it for whatever reason. And I think it's happened to a lot of us. Maybe some people it doesn't happen to. Maybe I'm completely off the mark, but I know that sometimes, when you're looking to get something new, you look at your pieces that you might want to move, and maybe they and you realize that you can, maybe you don't have an attachment to them anymore. But my point is asking the question is, I think that it's why it's not just not a bad thing, but it can actually be a really good thing. There's several good things that can come out of selling a piece for less than you got it for. So like I said, if you're trying to save up for a big piece, so you're going through your collection, you're trying to clear it out, and you're finding pieces that maybe you can part with because maybe you don't have enough cash. We talk about all the time about how, sometimes you need to have that nest egg just in case that perfect piece comes along. And sometimes you just don't. And then you start looking at your collection and saying, you know what, I don't really, it's not like I'm looking to get rid of this stuff, but I think I could let it move on to someone else. And then you go to see what the market is for it, and maybe it's not quite where it was when you bought it. Maybe you bought it above value because you had an attachment to it, or maybe there just isn't, at that time, there isn't the want for the piece. But there's several good things that can come out of selling a piece for less than you bought it for. And I'm keep looking down at my thing because I've got so many different methods that I think are great. One of them is I call it the scalping method. And if anybody is familiar with somebody who scalps tickets at any kind of sporting event, they sell before the show starts. They sell really, really high, and that's where they make all of their profit. And then as it starts getting closer to showtime or game time, the prices drop significantly, and then they get to that point where the show is about to start, and they're basically breaking even. And then after that, they can sell the rest of the tickets off after the game or the show's already started for less, because at that point they're worth more to them to kind of like get rid of than they are to keep. Now it's a little different with art. Obviously, the paper in a scalper's pockets, once the event's over, it's trash, and art's never trash. But if you're trying to save up for that one really, great piece, then maybe you're only a little bit short of it, and you've made such a profit off of the first couple pieces that you can let the other ones go. So it's a great way to meet that goal. And you don't look at it as, oh, I sold this for, however much less than I bought it for. You look at it as I was able to sell all 10 of these pieces, and I raised the money that I needed to raise, which I was hoping to raise to get the other piece. another great one, and I Arango was doing it earlier, is sort of networking. When he was talking, basically using his art to suggestions to try to get out there and talk to the people who are holding on to the art that he wants. And that's another great thing. You can sell a piece of art to someone who has several pieces that you like. Maybe they know someone that or represent someone, or know a friend of a friend, or just to make really good friendships and connections. You're ready to let a piece go. Maybe they don't want to spend exactly what you're looking for, but you work with them because it could have definite advantages in the future. And I want to make sure people don't confuse this with sort of there's this thing called like skunk cost, which is like if so, like basically you've bought something and it's never going to go back up in value, so you just need to get rid of it, and you're just holding on to it because you can't part with it because you don't want to take the loss, and even though it's never going to go back up. And that I find that that's not what this is about at all. It's just about trying to turn these things that you love into more things that you love, and it's also sort of paying it forward to other people. But I'd love to hear if anybody else in the group has done this, or I know a lot of you are newer collectors, so you probably have that hold on to everything tight. And anybody who knows me, my life is a cautionary tale on letting go of art too soon, because some of the pieces that I owned that I let go of in the late 90s that I had, or early 2000s that I had for a decade, if I had held on to them and hadn't let them go, I'd be living in a much bigger house than I'm living in now, let's just say.
Yeah, I haven't sold a ton of art that I've collected. I've sold a few, but almost exclusively in every case that I've sold it, it's been and when I've done it in the way that you were talking about, where I'm like, you know what, I'll sell it for less than I paid for it. It's because I had such a negative experience attached to that art. It had no emotional connection to me. I just wanted it out. I wanted it gone. So, there's a couple that have had, either they didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, and I kind of attached a value to it that I was like, okay, this is what this would be worth, and I'm willing to let it go for less than I paid for it, because I just kind of want it out. It's an airing out, kind of a cleansing of the karma, if you will. Or I had just a god awful experience getting it, and I was like, let it go. That's another way. It from a financial standpoint, it sounds like it's not a great thing to do, but I agree with you in those certain cases that I've had to do it and I've done it for less than I paid for it. I felt way better once I got rid of it. So, I mean, if I lost 10% on it or whatever that was, it was worth it to me just to get it out of my line of sight.
Aranga, I'm curious, is that when you say you had bad experiences, is that pretty much exclusively to commissions, or is there any published pieces where, because I find that there's much more experience tied to a commission than there is to a published piece usually?
Absolutely, 100%. They were all commissions. Yeah. I feel like with the published piece, right? Unless you got it in a condition that wasn't advertised, like it was, there was something happened with it. I mean, what the end product is, but and I've never, when a commission hasn't turned out the way I thought it would, or like it's not exactly right, I don't generally go to the artist and we talk about it or whatever, because if the experience was fair and fun, I still hang on to it. That's kind of not what I'm talking about when something doesn't turn out quite the way I thought. But if it's, I'm speaking more about when the as a whole, the communication aspect of it, it's just a negative energy attached to it. It's just,
that makes sense.
It's just good to exercise that from your life.
Yeah, and Jeff, I think a lot of what you're talking about really is about like leveraging the equity in your collection. Because I mean, I think a lot of us have a lot of equity in our collections, and it's something I've thought about a lot. It's been really difficult for me, is because I really, almost every purchase I've made is something that I care a lot about, especially my biggest purchases. I've only ever sold one piece of art, and it was something I sent to Comic Link, and it was by Trad Moore, so I did pretty well on it. But it's something I've thought about a lot, because it's like there's certain pieces out there where it's like I really want pieces X, Y, and Z, and I really love pieces A, B, and C that I have, if I had the opportunity to sell A, B, and C, and then I could get X, Y, Z, I would be really happy about that. But it's a lot of times it's so specific in terms of the way that you would exchange those pieces that it can be really tough. Because I don't know for sure I could get XYZ if I sold ABC, and then I'd just be out of ABC. But being able to leverage that equity you have in that collection, if say piece X that you really want comes available and you can make a quick sale on ABC if you price it a little lower than what you paid for it, that can really allow you again to leverage the equity in your collection, allow you to get something you really want. Although I probably would caution that in the current market, it's probably for a lot of pieces, you can probably sell it for a lot more than you paid for it at this very moment. But no, I think it is important, especially like you mentioned, if there's a piece you're just not as in love with as you used to be, or something happened with it, then it's good to move on and convert it into something better.
Sure. I also like when I think about this as a question, I also think about like, when you're trading up, like say you got, it's mostly for, taking smaller pieces and getting, for me at least, it's like, like you're trying to get that, we'll just say like a Jim Lee piece. So you start off with maybe a remark, and then you get, a sketch on paper, and then you're like, well, now I've got two, and I liked the remark before, but it was kind of like a stepping stone. So you can let that go. But if I put these two together, maybe I can get this, this torso, and then you kind of move it. And it's like, it doesn't have to be, because like what everybody forgets about this is that when you're buying the art, like half the greatness of buying the art is getting it, and you finally get it. And that high you feel, it's like the same high that people feel when they go to sporting events, when they go on vacations, when they buy ice cream or go to the movies. Now those are experiences that are wonderful, and you could say the memories can never be replaced, but they have nothing tangible to show for it afterwards. And that's the great thing about, I think, collecting art, is that you're putting your money, your hard-earned money into this stuff, but you're getting that same feeling that you get from going to a sporting event or a family vacation or going to Disney World. Only you have this thing that's left over. And even if you let it go for 80% of what you bought it for, I mean, that's basically being able to sell memories. It's being able to sell something that, without ever losing it, and the fact that you were part of its history, and being able to turn it into something else that you can have that great feeling for again. Because I think for a lot of us, like it's some of it's about the hunt. And we try to live in the moment, and you try to like get it. And when you get a new piece, you want to just love it and have it there for, forever. But we all know what happens after, a day or 2 days or a week is it ends up getting, either it goes on a wall with other pieces, or it goes into a portfolio, and then you move on to the next piece and the next hunt and the next chase. And I think with a lot of you guys being a little bit newer, you haven't gone through that. Like you love every single thing. And I say this, Rob, you're the way you collect. It just blows my mind, because you've only been doing this for so long, and you're meticulous about this, and you have a plan. And I was always just a, fly by the seat of my pants, go get the stuff, and that was it. I never had a plan when I was doing this. I mean, there wasn't really a plan, and you just saw guys, you liked their stuff, and you got it. And now I find that I'm trying to parlay my collection into something bigger, and sometimes I can't afford to put aside the now you need the 5 figures, or even 4 or 5 figures that you need to get those pieces. And it's sometimes really great to have those things that you can use, the equity in your collection, to get those pieces that could really make you extremely happy and get you to the point where you want to be at.
I mean, I haven't sold any art, but I mean, it's not that I don't have any experience selling things. But what you're speaking of to me seems like the main things are the two things that I took out of it is timing and expectations. I mean, does everybody expect to automatically make like 800% more than they originally bought it for? Like, because that seems unrealistic, right? And in most cases, I'd say, I don't know, maybe 80-20 rule, right? Like most times, yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe art is unique, but a lot of times, something is used. You're not gonna, whatever new car price you paid for, you're not gonna trade it in for that new car price, right? So you kind of have to have that expectation going into some of that stuff. And then the timing thing can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. It can drive you crazy, and it can also make you like jump for joy, right? I mean, there were Spider-Man comics that I sold that I made a decent profit on. I sold Golden Age comics that I made a decent profit on. But then, you have no way of knowing like the future ball thing where you're looking and going, I probably gave away a Batman Adventures 13. I had no idea that like 25 years from now it was going to be this key book or whatever it was. I had no idea that, New Mutants 98 was going to be this, the greatest thing since sliced bread, or you know what I was looking at, you talked about the She-Hulk thing, and I was looking at some things online, and all of a sudden I noticed on eBay the jump rope issue is for some reason like a gazillion dollars, and it's like, what? Like, so I mean, that kind of stuff is going to happen. And I guess if you dwell on that, then yeah, I guess that's going to mess with your head. But sometimes there's probably a good point in terms of timing where, you have to let that stuff go, right? Like, either you made the profit or you didn't make the profit. But once you made the sale, like, sometimes you got to kind of just turn all that off and not, constantly be going back and going, oh man, I only sold, Batman Adventures 13 for $1. What, like, all right, so well.
And one thing I heard early on in my collecting that resonated with me was when someone asks you if something is for sale, or when you offer something for sale, the minute you've kind of put a price on it and put it out there, mentally I find you've overcome a barrier that I'm ready to let go of this piece because I did put a price on it, and I know when I was interviewed by Bill, I mentioned that there was one occasion in which I gave someone a price, and I was really thankful, like a day later, that they said no, because I realized it would have been a mistake to let go of that piece. But by and large, for the most part, when I put a price on something and I offered for sale, I've overcome that mental barrier, and it's ready to go. But yeah, I'm surprised by people who are able to turn over pieces so easily, because even when I did Dueling Dealers, even to come up with the 15 to 25 pieces that you need for that, it was kind of hard for me. I couldn't do it again. I'm not willing to let go of my pieces. I think when you start with buy what you love and you kind of stick to that, it really becomes hard to let go of pieces until you become maybe a more mature, seasoned collector, or you've bought things with the express purpose of trading them or selling them later on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. I really like all the different views on everything. It's great. I just wanted to see it from a different point of view.
I think it's a natural question that comes up when you're in this extremely absurdly expensive hobby, especially to like Rob said, you have to leverage your collection to get what you want, and that's a skill that I think comes with time and knowing what the hobby is and how to work it.
And it definitely works well. I mean, the concept of selling for less than you paid for, if you were applying it towards a trade, I think that's a lot more palatable than just kind of getting cash back.
Yeah, and you're also hopefully averaging things out, right? You sold one piece where you made a lot of money, and that helps alleviate the cost of selling something for less than cost.
Right. Yeah, and that's not. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was trying to point out, that if you made a lot off of a few, and you had a goal of the amount of money you wanted to reach, then selling one for less, you just have to look at it more like you got all the prices you wanted for everything, even though you really got more for this one and less for this one, because you met that goal that you wanted to reach.
Again, just from my amateur Dueling Dealers experience, and the way I see Anthony and Berkey working in the recap round, I feel like that's just a very natural state of things. You average out your buying and your selling.
Yeah, I was watching you on that show, and you were like, by the time it got to recap, you were like, I'm just keeping all of these. Nope.
Well, but again, I'm an amateur, right? Like, I really, if I hadn't, after the show, I sold the Quietly as well. But I would not have, put that up if I was not willing to let go of it.
I think I know who you sold the Quietly to.
Well, Nick
it on Twitter. Yeah.
I'm super happy it went to him too, because it, just kind of, that makes it more pleasant that it went to a good home, somebody who loves Frank. But yeah,
that's kind of I think that's too, right? Like, you can stomach letting something go if you knew it was going to somebody pretty much forever home. I don't think that piece is gonna move.
Or that it goes to somebody who it means a lot to.
Yeah.
And that's so much better than seeing it slipped a couple of months later, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
That's the thing, and that's the hardest thing about selling something like in an auction format is because you have no idea who's going to get it, and you're just that's the one benefit. And like I said, it's really great for networking is to sell to a person and not sell to a highest bidder, because the highest bidder is great, but inevitably you have no idea where that's going to end up. You don't know what's going to happen to it, and then you see it on an art site, you see it somewhere else, and you're like, well, I thought I was giving this piece to somebody who'd really enjoy it and it's somebody who's trying to forecast the future. So that's another good point.
Yeah, I think that's not to start a whole new topic, but I think that's one thing that's really interesting too about being transparent about the art that you want as well. I have the fortunate/unfortunate circumstance where everybody knows exactly what art I want. And but I think that's been a benefit as much as anything is because people know that if they sell me a particular piece, that it's going to be treasured forever. And I mean, I've had people come to me with pieces because of that as well. But I think that's definitely a consideration when we're thinking about these artifacts that are going to live longer than us, and who are the caretakers that we're passing them on to with each sale.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Excellent point.
All right. Well, thank you, Jeff and Rob. I believe we're looking at your art, so let's dig right into that.
Sure. So the first piece that I selected is somehow a piece of Cosmic Ghost Rider art that's not in my collection. But
imagine that.
Yeah, I know. But I wanted to highlight this. I think it's a really cool piece of a character I really like, but I wanted to highlight it as much for the artist as well. So this is by Matteo Scalera. And I just think Scalera is a fantastic artist. I think there's a couple elements that you can often see in his work. Works a lot with perspective. So you can see like on this one, you're kind of having this. What's up?
Oh, no, thought we lost you for a second. Go ahead.
You can see you kind of got this low angle view of this kind of and this foreshortening perspective where the piece is coming towards you. And it's just really fantastic. I think if you look at a lot of Scalera's art, you'll see a lot of unique use of perspective, whether it's kind of a looking up perspective, or I think there's a few pieces he did with mirrors and some Batman covers that are really interesting. But he uses a lot of perspective. He also has a very animated and a very finished style to his pieces as well. I'm not sure if it's an ink wash or what it is that he uses on this, but all his pieces really have this just really dynamic, animated, finished look to them. I mean, if you're talking about like modern art where it's all done traditionally, like I think this is bad. To be fair, I don't know if his pencils are digital or not, but he definitely goes all out on his pages to make it really look like a finished piece at the end of the day. So this is in the collection of Carl sees. So just wanted to highlight this. I think it's a fantastic cover by a fantastic artist. Yeah, we can go on to the next piece.
Yeah, he's a stone cold killer, man. I mean, his work is just absolutely. So what's really cool about this piece is like, if you look down to the vanishing point of this piece, those speed lines that are coming out aren't just straight speed lines. They're wormholing. So they're essentially curving as you go, from like the bottom all the way clockwise up top. It's really a twisted, it's corkscrewing as it comes through. That's some skill, man, to achieve that look, and he does it effortlessly.
And I think I'd love to add that down the road, we really need to talk about the Italian and Spanish schools of finishing comic art, because I'm seeing these artists like Scalera, like a newer artist is Francesco Mobili. They're finishing the pages gorgeously in these ink washes that adds so much texture and so much depth to the images. It's really, really fascinating, and it's a beautiful technique.
I know, Nick. Nick Klein has done that on his Thor pages as
Absolutely, 100%. Yep.
Yeah. We're kind of losing ground to the Italians and the Spaniards here, man, because they're putting out some stuff. I mean, Pepe is like a
I wouldn't say
generational.
losing ground. It's just a school of thought. It's a very, and it's a movement that's in the purely traditional form.
The invasion is real though, because I would say Pepe is like a generational X-Men artist right now, and it's not even close to, I mean, you'd have to look back a few eras before you kind of got to his, and his output isn't like huge either. But I'm 100% agreeing with you, Kyle. I mean,
you better.
The stuff.
I'm the host.
I am actually. I think you're full of garbage, but no, you're.
Speaking of garbage,
right.
let's take a look at.
It's a rough segue. Rough segue.
Cheers.
No, I just this piece that's coming up. I'm glad Rob chose it. It's spectacular. And going back to our earlier discussion, it's a piece I believe the owner was only able to acquire by being deft and fast and up to date as to what's happening by his favorite artist and what was available. So let's take a look.
Yeah, so I don't have the full story on how Jason acquired this piece, but I do know this was exhibited at a tribute to Otomo exhibit. And this is a piece of Tetsuo, which is a character from Akira. And this is it's by Ian Bertram in the collection of Jason K. This piece is just like Ian Bertram, I think, is just phenomenal. He's an artist that I definitely at some point want to add something to my collection, but just haven't figured out what yet. And just seeing pieces like this is part of the reason why, whether it's this or like his artist choice commissions or some of the other like essentially fine art that he produces, he just has a mastery with how he creates the different shapes and the textures within the pieces and the shading. And I mean, this piece just completely just captures the emotion at the end of that movie. If you've ever seen Akira before, and I don't know. I mean, just you can look at it. I don't know what else to say about it. It's really phenomenal.
It's insane. It almost looks like an etching. It looks like something that could be years and years old, and with the detail. And it's just I mean, I can't even. It just digs into your soul. It's breathtaking.
Yeah, etching's interesting. I think that is like how a lot of Ian's work looks, is like it's like a woodcut or an etching. Mm-hmm. It's a really different. It really differentiates his work.
That's like the dude to go artist choice with, right? Ian.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I know you said it evokes the feeling from the film, but I also would heartily recommend the manga to accompany that if you've never tried it, because I feel like tons of people have talked about the film to death, but seeing this in black and white and just seeing the imagery of Tetsuo, I mean, it to me, this evokes more than just the film. Like, this to me evokes the basically everything that happens after the end of the film, the Tetsuo and his crazy harem and all this like ridiculous like post-apocalyptic kind of
I think Derek, you hit the nail right on the head. Like, this shows us Tetsuo as he was in the middle of the series, and we never, it's alluded to, and we're given all the clues as to what his mind must feel like, but this image shows it to us that this is what it was like for him, the conflict that was constantly within him, and then to put him on Akira's throne, and that the weight of that stone chair is evident. Ian's styles and techniques are really breathtaking.
Yeah, this is an awesome piece. It looks really cool.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Well, thank you, Rob, for sharing.
For sure.
Absolutely. That was
right. We've been saving the best for last. So let's bring in our boy and see what he has to say.
So I'm assuming you're saying, hey, let's start off for the topic. My topic
No,
is...
we're saying that Iranga was going to draw for us.
I can't wait till Bill comes back. My topic is cultivating your art circle. There's been different episodes where different panel members have talked about this. James actually started out on the first show talking about how to build your network. Shout out to James. But I would like to say it's a continuation of that and some of the stuff that people have built on. A lot of what was spoken about in that period or early on when we were talking about it was building your network as a new collector and the social aspects of it. What I'd like to talk about is like when you're starting out, you cast a wide net, right? You talk to a lot of people, you get opinions from people, and at some point you start shrinking that circle down based on the experiences you've had. So that's where I kind of want to get to, because I have, personally, I've got a group of people that, based on kind of, if I'm making a decision on a piece of art that I need some opinions on, I'll reach out to a few. Some have become friends. Some that I still talk to today aren't. I wouldn't say we're buddies or we'll go out and drink a beer together or anything like that. But when it comes to, hey, I need an opinion on this, I know I can get a solid one from them. So to me, it's more of like, how do you, as you go along in the hobby, what are the things that are important to you in your collecting? How do you ascribe important levels of importance to other people's opinions or what they bring to the table? Because you can't keep going out into this wide swath and asking for opinions, because at the end of the day, it's important to remember that not everyone has the same taste in art or the same aesthetic as you do in your collecting. And it's not important that your circle, these consiglieres, if you will, of yours, have the same taste in art that you do. But a level head when it comes to that kind of stuff is important. And I've got a circle of people that I rely on for that when the time comes. There's a mix of, I think it's important to have a mix of older collectors. When I'm talking old, I'm not talking about necessarily age like Jeff. I'm talking about years of experience like Jeff. Years of experience is what I'm talking about. But newer collectors as well, because there are things, I've talked to collecting friends of mine that don't read as many comics as they do today, and they're able to find out about newer artists and learn about newer artists from me, as I am. Kind of, it's a symbiotic relationship in that regards. So having that mix of older and newer collectors is kind of neat in your collection, and I think imperative. I would say when you have a group of that sort, trust your gut for the art. Trust your circle for value, pricing, and deals, because art's going to be, it's subjective. And I personally don't go out to too many people or almost anyone for like an opinion on the art, because the art either gets me or it doesn't. I'm not buying this thing to flip it or to figure out what the value is in terms of that. I'm buying it because it appeals to me. What I do want a group around me is a representative group of an era or whatever that can tell me, am I getting played? Am I, here's the value. Where am I going with it? And things like that. Stick to your gut for the art. Don't let anyone tell you. Don't let anyone. Jeff is old, but he's a good looking old. He's been assaulting the fountain of youth. So, but don't let anyone tell you regardless of they've got 30 years in the collecting business or like 2 years in the collecting business, of how good a piece of art is. You are the ultimate arbiter of that. I personally don't. I don't have the time or the patience for someone telling me that. I know what I think in that fits my aesthetic of what I think is good art. I don't usually go out to people for that, but I do want the blanks filled in in terms of the financial aspect of it, because that's where I don't have a lot of experience. You can also fall into some traps with that, right? Because as you get in on the ground as a new collector, I remember I've had an overwhelmingly positive experience with other collectors, right? But the negative experiences do stand out, and that's not necessarily kind of balanced on one end or the other with like more experienced collectors or newer collectors. But you will get that thing where you've got a lot to learn, and it's almost like no one's listening to you speak. They just want to get to the point where they tell you how long they've been collecting, and hey, let me tell you about blah 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 blah. And it's not a symbiotic relationship. You're not getting what you want out of that. You're basically just sitting there listening to someone talk about how much longer they've been collecting than you have, and it's exhausting. And you just like snip that in the bud, move on to the next dude. And the same thing applies for like newer collectors too, because you can get overzealous newer collectors, right? That don't do their, do your own research first. Have something to come ask somebody about. So have something prepared. I've done, there's groups out there. The amount of resources out there for you, I mean, it's incredible right now. It's not like it was pre-internet or what some of these other folks had to go through. So do your research and ask the questions. For me personally, as a newer collector, and I'm gonna, I've got a really good circle of people that a lot of them are my friends now. But I gotta tell you, like when I started out, and I'll give a shout out, Mike Goucher, and he was super patient. I just reached out to him and started asking questions, just really like some of them in hindsight were like pretty dumb questions. He was patient. He was kind. He was not condescending. He was not patronizing. And we developed like over the last couple of years. We just we're not. I wouldn't say we're buddies, but he's still a guy that if I'm about to make like a high dollar purchase, I'll shoot him a message and say, hey Michael, I'm thinking of doing this, and he will take the time to do that. And guys like Mike are the ones that I'm talking about when you're cultivating that circle, like guys that aren't just looking to, kind of patronize you or just, look for an opening where they can kind of talk to you endlessly about how awesome their art is, but guys that'll take the time to cultivate a relationship or give you real advice. But that's like my soapbox. It's important that you have it, not just the networking aspect of it, where you make friends and you have a few beers after a convention and you do that kind of stuff. But really, once you take the social aspect out of it, like a focused effort on, hey, I need to buy this art, and here's the dollar value that I'm thinking of. Who are the guys that you trust to go to? And I'm kind of curious.
I think it's a fantastic topic. It's especially, I think a lot of people will relate to it post-COVID, and I'd say you're underselling it greatly. A good circle, a good group will bring you pieces that you're looking for, will give you advance notice of things way before it makes it into Gen Pop, if it even makes it into Gen Pop. The best deals I find that go down are the private deals, right? Like, who wants to pay the juice? And without your circle, none of that is going to happen. So I think this is extremely important. And it's difficult for me as someone who's not extremely social to meet people and to, like you say, you wrote to someone and asked for advice. and I wouldn't even know how to begin to do that. I felt like, I feel like and there's so much material out there on the internet. And now imagine you were someone who was getting into comic art collecting today. The first thing I would do, unfortunately, as a not nice person, is be like, watch all of those shows. Right? Because that resource is now, after the past year, available. But prior to this year, maybe it wasn't. So you then had to go into the CGC forums, which can be not so nice, not so welcoming. So yeah, I think this is extremely important. And without the cons the last year, again, it's been, and even at a con, right? How easy is it to meet someone at a con? Everyone's kind of got their own thing going on, and it's difficult enough as it is to manage. So if someone reaches out to you and has a gallery that works with your aesthetic and that works for, the things that you relate to, that's a great start. Talk to that person, comments on people's pieces on CAF to help establish who you are in this hobby and what's your personality. That's important too. These are the only clues we really have to someone.
Right.
The art that they collect could be very misleading.
Well, yeah. And it's also important to remember that neither group is a monolith, right? The quote unquote new collector, is not just a babe in the woods. I mean, you talk to Rob, he's got he's a
shark in the woods.
He's sharp. He's got a specific vision for how he wants to curate his collection, and things like that. And there's stuff that people could and should learn from that. So, and at the same time, just because you've been collecting art for like 30 years doesn't mean your advice is necessarily indispensable. I mean, I've heard some garbage advice from people who've been in the game.
Just say it, Aranga. Just say it. It's okay. You can say my advice.
Jeff, I didn't want to name you. But
Jeff, we haven't even got into
Jeff,
the pieces that you sold and the prices you sold them for. So
okay,
we'll save that for.
Spoiler alert! Jeff and I talk about art like when I'm about to buy something, or when he's we talk about it quite a bit. So
Jeff's the one telling everybody to sell their art for less than what they paid for it. So
did you see how I don't know what you're talking about, Rob? I'm not doing that at all. No,
as soon as I saw what his topic was today, I kind of cut him out of my circle. I was like, get that dude out of there.
No, but in all seriousness, I love this topic because you know what? I think that watching a lot of these shows on Comic Art Live, it makes you feel sort of like the people who are on these shows even before you know them. Like I felt like I knew Mikhail before I ever got to meet him and actually talk to him face to face in a Zoom. And that's the thing is, so when you want to reach out to people, you talk about having your circle of friends. Well, if you're not comfortable like just messaging a complete stranger, but maybe now that you've seen us and you see that we're just normal people like everybody else, and maybe now you can put a face and a voice and and a temperament to all this collecting, you can see us as somebody you could talk to and you could ask a question about. And that's the great thing about these shows is every week we have these collector conversations and I love that it's a rotating forum where you're introduced to new people and you see that there's all these people out there, and any one of us I think would be more than welcome to have any questions answered, or maybe if we feel like you message us, we would love to talk to you too. I'm still learning. Like I said, I've been doing this for 30 plus years and I'm still learning all the time cool new things. Like I didn't, I found out something last night about an artist who was doing an art drop. It's not an art drop, but a sketch event, and I didn't know anything about it, and I probably wouldn't have found out about it if it hadn't been for the people in my group. So these are the great things that these things can offer. And that's another thing is I love that when James started this, sort of pitching it to Bill, it was he didn't just want to have 4 old collectors on who are all like, I remember when all these pages were $15. That wasn't the point of this. The point was to more have a wider range of people and a wider audience and to reach a wider audience. So yeah, it's a great resource here, and it's definitely great to have those people who you can talk to and ask. And I know that I talk to Aranga all the time about stuff that I'm thinking about getting. He's been nice enough to include me, and it's one of those things where we always kind of feel off other people. And even though some of the stuff, like you said, is completely different interests, we can sort of come around to, you can push somebody one way or another with a single comment that's like, that's very valuable, and that's something that's great to have.
Yeah, but understanding like the biases and not necessarily agendas. I don't want to use the word agendas, because agenda implies that there's someone out to get you, right? There are implicit biases with all collectors, but as long as you understand, like, he's saying that because he loves panel pages, or he loves a certain artist or whatever. As long as you understand all of that, I think it's important to also know that you don't necessarily have to be friends. Like, Jeff's a friend of mine, but like, you don't have to be friends to have those people in your circle. You can have a little bit more of like a business relationship. I mean, you can be acquaintances, but if you value each other's advice, you don't need to go out and have a beer at the end of the day. So seek out those people is what I'd say.
I can say, speaking from personal experience, that these series of shows kind of gave me license or encouraged me to reach out to other people on CAF, or the story I described with Fred, that putting it all together sort of thing, where it's kind of what you guys are talking about. I've podcasted for a long time, and what's funny about that is a lot of times all you hear is a voice, right? And so you have this image of somebody in your head, and then in some cases you get to meet them in person, and it kind of blows all that out of the water. But eventually it just becomes, you end up having this complete picture of I guess, in terms of this topic, in terms of your circle, and maybe certain people are more open to being asked questions, or some people even are kind enough to offer you help, right? Like, you might kind of put something out there and kind of be like, hey, I remember this, I have a question about that, like, can you help me out? And some people have been nice enough to hit me up on my personal CAF and be like, hey, I want to help you out with this. And then I guess, in terms of, I don't know if the goal is to eventually limit yourself to a circle of one being you, but like, if you're curating the circle, like sometimes going like straight to the horse's mouth sometimes can help out. I mean, it makes me think of, how do you find out if that, Rob Liefeld sketch is a fake? Like, they asked Rob Liefeld. Like, how do you find out if, for me, it was something I was like desperately wondering about, and I was like, how do I find out if there was an original character design for this amalgam character? And eventually what it came down to was me making friends with the original artist on Facebook and directly asking them about it. And the outcome of that is, no, there wasn't really any, character model or character design. But for me, that like satiated my curiosity. And I guess, speaking to Aranga's point, like, no, we're not best friends now. But I mean, we had a nice conversation, and occasionally he may, like something I post on social media, and vice versa. And that's kind of like a nice thing, because that, I guess, in that sense, you're like, okay, this person is part of my, my circle, and
Right.
maybe think of it as like a mutually beneficial resource, where, either you're entertaining one another, or you're possibly, getting new information that you never knew before.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah.
I think it's really important to have kind of a circle of friends too, not just people who. There's kind of two different things, and I think having that circle of friends to enjoy the hobby with, and to you can share opinions, but maybe they're not always going to know exactly the answer to the question that you've got, because maybe they have slightly different interests in their particular collecting art. But having those friends to enjoy the hobby with, and to kind of have your back in different situations, I think is really important. But then, knowing, to Aranga's point, knowing who knows specific markets can be really helpful too. I mean, if anybody's ever got a question about Jeff Shaw market, I can tell you all about the Jeff Shaw market. But no, but I think, like, at the end of the day, like, having that circle of friends is, I think, as important or more important than is sometimes having that specific financial information, or like just data or information, is because ultimately I think that's what's going to help you enjoy the hobby more at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I'll come out and say, like, if there's anyone that's watching that wants to drop me like a message, like email me on CAF or whatever.
Sorry, Aranga. I saw you. Every segment's turning into a want list.
Did you read my lips?
No, but I agree. Your
I'm just
friends
saying, like,
know
if you
what
want
you want.
to talk art or whatever, call me. I'll be part of your art circle. That's what I was saying. And you can catch my OnlyFans at
.keyown.com.
That's right.
No, I think it's so valuable. It's absolutely incredible. Like to have somebody who will, let you know that, hey, I saw this. It's up your alley. And to Rob's point, it's almost better that they're not in the same group as you, right? Or in the same art vein as you, right? I was in a group and people were like, oh, let's add, this guy. And I'm like, oh, fucking CGR focused collector. Like, what the fuck, And then I saw his interview with Bill, and this guy, this weirdo who only collects CGR, just he presented his case so well, and I really appreciated where he was coming from and how he approached the hobby, and the way the aspects were different from the way I was collecting, and you really need to open yourself up to how people collect and what it brings to them. And it doesn't matter if it's different. And certainly, going back to our first topic, if you have a circle with 10 or 12 people and 2 of them are reading the modern books, that's a great entry point for you. Take their recommendations. You like them, you like their taste. This is someone who's doing the work for you. And so if they're really into something, that's something that may work for you. So it helps broaden my horizon. I get recommendations that I take and that 9 out of 10 times work out. And that's a pretty good percentage, because there's so much material out there. It's not for everyone, right? Not everyone is a horror fan. Not everyone is a conspiracy fan. Not everyone is a superhero fan. And that's great, because now there's the content for you. But there's room for all of us to talk together about what we like about the work, how the artist is putting the work in, how the writer is, molding stories and looking back and forward. It's really fantastic. And this is the crux of what people say now about the golden age of comics. Any great story can be made, I think, and that's really worth something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fuck you guys.
Oh,
So can I make my pitch, since we're a little under 2 hours, to try to get my last piece of art on at some point, maybe?
Make I'll mute his ass.
I didn't get your Venmo. Let's see it. I'll put it up. Go for it.
Let's see. Just to finish off, I get to bookend this. This is kind of cool. This is another new thing, depending on whether or not he can actually throw it up. That's not it. But this is someone else.
I guess I'm
You
going
go,
first.
you
So
you go first, buddy.
Yeah.
You go.
All right, let's go around, guys.
And then
we'll
you can book
finish
and
off with the unsocial person.
That's
so
awesome.
as I alluded to earlier, I'm on a Tom Grummett commission list. I managed to get 2 spots, so I have one already. It's got pretty, at least for me, it's got high views on CAF. And then I've got one coming in the mail. But when I saw this, this was one of the many great pieces that has come out, and I'm always impressed when someone's able to get something on like a really huge board and have all kinds of different characters. This is entitled the Batman Superman Family Crossover, and it's from the gallery of John Burke. And I mean, again, for me, Grummett is one of my favorite artists. It's a weird thing to say, but I always feel like he makes people look like they're supposed to. And whether, you think that means on model or what, but I always think everybody looks perfect when Grummett draws them. And so it's kind of a nice collection of characters. Like you've got like the Earth 2 Robin and Batman and Huntress. And I love the way that Nightwing is eyeing up, Helena Wayne, and Helena Wayne's kind of looking back at him. I love the way that, the Earth 2 Batman is introducing Tim Drake to the kind of classic Batmobile. You know, they've got, you know, of course, all the staples of the Batcave, the giant penny, the dinosaur, and then of course you've got Earth to Superman kind of looking chagrined that he's got knockout on his arm, and that's just, you know, it's great. It's a nice touch, and then of course what's kind of funny is you know, Connell is kind of perving on Helena too. So it's like, I don't know, there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on in that image, but it's a nice collection of characters, and I'm sure, you know, the owner is beyond thrilled to have it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a nice looking piece, man, for sure. And you did say that was a commission, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was. I'm guessing, because I mean there are similar tiers, you know, like where they'll do pencils and inks, and then pencils, inks, and watercolors. So I'm assuming this was the penciled, inked, and watercolored. And then for my second piece, this is Glenn Fabry, and it's Preacher and Hitman. It's Tommy Monahan and the Reverend Jesse Custer. And I guess the reason why I picked this is I know that on the show that Rob was on, they talked a lot about collector focus and everything. And I feel like this is one of my focuses or mantras. It's like getting like something that's either in your head or in your head canon or just some idea, some concept you had. And a lot of it for me is related to wild and crazy team ups, or team ups that just would be untenable, you know, because of the different ownerships involved and everything. And in this case, maybe it's not so much a case of ownership, but I just saw this piece and I just thought, man, what a great idea. Like, this is awesome. Like why wouldn't you put these two guys together? Like, this is so cool. And I love Preacher and I love Hitman. And I just thought, I it's like one of those things where when you see it, you're like, you feel kind of stupid that you never thought of it before, and that's kind of my goal with some things, is like, if I have those thoughts where I'm like, wouldn't it be great if, like, I wish I thought of it, but, wouldn't it be great if Jesse Custer and Tommy Monahan, had a beer together and they hung out and then they whooped ass in a bar together, and you just think of all kinds of crazy stuff that would be great to happen. And, that's basically why I picked this one, because I think it's awesome.
And you know what? Like when that popped up, right? It took a second for like my brain like to connect that. Wait a second, this is a crossover thing, because it looked like a Preacher cover, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it just looked like a Preacher cover, and I was like, wait, that's Hitman. Yeah, great cover, man.
Yeah, Fabry does incredible things with the paints, and just his stuff's just unmistakable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is kind of strange as well, right? Because there's two significantly different aesthetics to like the interiors on Preacher versus the covers, and like those covers are always like, there's no doubt that that's Preacher, and I find it hard to divorce it when you just pop that image up. I was like, oh, a Preacher cover. I was like, wait, I don't remember that cover, and then I was like, oh, yeah.
That is kind of one of those elusive qualities to commissioning things, right? Because if you have a foresight, right? If you know that one artist is known for a specific character, and then, in some sense you can extend that, right? Like, that's why you had that moment where it's like, well, Glenn Fabry's not really known for Hitman, right? But he is known for Preacher, and then that sells you on the image. So it's like, that's why I was like, this is perfect,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Great art, man. Love that.
Yeah. And I don't want to steal your thunder off of your art thing. I just want to throw this up real quick, because this was the other piece I picked from 1989. Sorry, Ranga. And this is one of the pieces where Jim Aparo is my Batman artist. He's the artist that was on Batman the entire time I was, reading Batman in my early teens. And I honestly was looking for a cover to show off something that was really great and signature. And this is the case where I find this page way more compelling. The image of Batman, the fact that it has the Commissioner Gordon on it, I find this image like more striking than almost all of the covers that I could find out there. So it's another point where it's not even a splash. It might be, you might call it a third splash, and how he breaks the panel a little bit into the second. But I think this is a piece that I love, and I wish I'd written down the name of the person who calf this is in. But it's if I had a piece of Batman art like this, I would be this would be the piece that I would be proud to represent Paro in my collection if I had it.
I believe it's Namor of Atlantis. I know that probably doesn't help, but that's whose gallery it's in.
Ah. Well, that's why, I can't find it anywhere. It's not, on the dry earth. So.
Also because he's a fictional character, Jeff.
Yes.
Yes. That too. But so it's just to show you the two different things that were going on back in 1989. That both of these things are drastically different, the bowl and this. But it's just it all hit my wheelhouse for things that
this hits my sweet spot because nothing's more quintessential, at least in the era I was collecting comics, than a Paro Batman. I mean, there was for me it was the Neil Adams Power Records and then Jim Aparo, and that was quintessential Batman. And this is like what 2 or 3 issues after Death in the Family, so it's he's searching for a missing child, and then everybody's like, the kid's been missing for 7 years. Gordon's like, this kid is dead, there's no way. And he's like, why do you care about this so much? And he doesn't say anything, but it's because Jason's just died, and he's not gonna let this thing go. So it's and then he finds the kid, but this is like the climax of the whole thing. And it is a really, I mean, if you were gonna get a page from this, this is definitely the page to get.
Oh yeah.
And we didn't get, there's a whole story in which, Jason's school calls. Where is he? What's going on with Jason Todd? Is he coming back? Is he graduating? I mean.
Oh my God.
We didn't get to see any of that. It's a tragedy.
No.
Those are those issues. I don't think were going to be real big sellers. I think they might have lost it in editing.
DC went through a tough time.
He's missed 87 days in a row. Where is he? That would have been a great Batman book where Batman goes to jail because Jason Todd hasn't showed up to school for 60 days.
You're right. Parenting. Where's your ward? This legal person who belongs to you. Where is he?
Yeah. Get on it, Alan Moore. Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's fine. Superboy Prime will just punch him back in the skull, and nobody will be the wiser.
There you go.
I'm sure that's a story that will bring Alan Moore out of retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. The
guys,
behind the scenes of what
somehow,
happened.
despite the gremlins in the machine trying to trip me up, trying to, F up Collector Conversations number 8, we made it to the 2-hour mark. And I think we really shared some fantastic information that I was really pleased to hear about. Topics we can delve into much deeper and on many different levels. And so I'd like to thank you all for your participation. And I'd also like to say to the people watching, if anyone has an interest in coming on the show and sharing your particular expertise or your particular area of focus, please write to any of us or write to Bill at bill@comicartfans.com. We really love, we were saying earlier, the focus of the show is not to be stodgy and old and set in established parameters, but to bring in all the new perspectives of new collectors and different collectors in the hobby. And we really mean that, I hope.
Yeah. Can we also just say, for all of us
on
this panel, don't mute you. Don't mute me. I'm about to say something nice about you. Don't. So for all of us on this panel and in here, we miss seeing Bill on here, but there was no evidence based on anyone that's known you that you could pull this off competently, and you did. You actually pulled it off competently. So I didn't.
We didn't get the images on screen in the right way. It was a mess.
Listen, they all made it. They all made it.
You did a great job. Thank you from us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
It worked because everyone is starved for content following Bill's vacation. And I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. Come watch Collector Conversations because honestly, it's all you've got. That's going to be our catchphrase.
There's nothing else out there on Sunday at 10 p.m. Yes.
But fantastic stuff, everyone. Thank you again. And Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed any part of this nonsense. Join us next week for an entire raft of programming that Bill will be in charge of and will be much more professionally managed. You'll see end graphics, beginning graphics, overlays, everything will be perfect. So don't take me as indicative of what this channel can be when it can be so much more.
I think you're selling yourself short, Mikhail.
I do
you
too.
did
I
great,
think you
brother.
did a great job.
You did great.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and we will see you next week.
Take care, everyone.
Have a great night,
Cheers.
everybody.